Ladies and gentlemen, the decision to deliver a global address in English represents a significant moment in the evolving communication strategy of the Catholic Church. Historically, official church communications, especially those of the highest authority, have been steeped in tradition, often delivered in Latin or the native languages of popes past. Latin, in particular, has long served as the Church's liturgical and administrative language, reinforcing the institution's historical continuity and doctrinal consistency. However, the use of English in such a globally significant message signals a deliberate pivot toward accessibility, inclusivity, and modernization. It is a move that acknowledges the realities of a rapidly globalizing world, where language plays a central role in shaping understanding, unity, and influence. English, while not the most spoken language in terms of native speakers, functions today as the de facto global lingua franca. It is the language of international diplomacy, commerce, technology, and increasingly, digital communication. By choosing English as the medium for a global address, the Church is strategically positioning itself to reach a broader audience, particularly younger generations and populations beyond its traditional strongholds in Europe and Latin America. This decision reflects a growing awareness that the message of the Church, rooted in values of compassion, justice, and spiritual renewal, must be intelligible to the majority if it is to remain influential in the modern world. Moreover, this choice carries symbolic weight. It represents a bridge between centuries, old traditions, and the demands of a contemporary audience. The shift does not signal a rejection of heritage, but rather an evolution in how that heritage is conveyed. In choosing to speak in English, the address becomes more than a sermon. It becomes a statement of openness and readiness to engage with all people, regardless of their cultural or linguistic background. It reinforces the idea that the Church is not confined to a particular region or linguistic group, but is a universal institution concerned with the well-being of all humanity. From an educational perspective, this transition is important to highlight because it offers insight into how global institutions adapt to remain relevant. The Church has often been perceived as conservative and resistant to change. Yet, throughout history, it has periodically made crucial adaptations in response to shifts in societal structures, communication technologies, and cultural dynamics. For example, the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s introduced profound changes in liturgy and approach, aiming to make the Church more comprehensible and connected to the modern world. The recent use of English in such a high-profile context can be viewed as part of that ongoing journey, a step toward renewing the dialogue between tradition and modernity. Another layer of significance lies in the potential pedagogical impact of such a shift. Language is more than a tool for communication. It shapes thought, frames cultural narratives, and influences the reception of ideas. When a figure of global moral and spiritual authority chooses to speak in English, it not only ensures wider understanding, but also repositions the role of religious teaching within global education. It offers an opportunity for educators, scholars, and students around the world to engage with the Church's messages more directly, without the need for translation or interpretation. This direct access helps preserve the nuances of tone, intention, and emotional weight that are often lost in translation. Additionally, the use of English allows the message to circulate more rapidly and widely through digital platforms, from news outlets to social media. In today's media ecosystem, where information competes for attention in real time, the ability to communicate swiftly and clearly is invaluable. The Church's use of English, therefore, enhances its visibility and enables it to contribute more effectively to contemporary discourse on ethics, human dignity, and global challenges. Finally, there is a pedagogical lesson in the boldness of this linguistic choice. It teaches that effective leadership often involves meeting people where they are, rather than expecting them to come to you. By adopting a globally familiar language, the message is not only heard but also felt. It becomes part of a shared global moment. This decision reaffirms the idea that relevance in communication is not a betrayal of tradition, but rather a respectful acknowledgement that tradition must live, breathe, and adapt in order to serve its purpose in an ever-changing world. In essence, this keynote moment serves as a powerful case study in institutional adaptability, linguistic strategy, and the universalizing potential of communication. It demonstrates how language choices reflect deeper intentions and evolving philosophies, reminding us that even the most ancient institutions can find fresh ways to speak to the present and inspire the future. The deliberate use of English in a global religious address carries more than just practical implications. It is a symbolic gesture that emphasizes the unifying potential of language. In an era defined by cultural diversity, geopolitical fragmentation, and digital interconnection, the choice of a common linguistic platform has the power to bring people together across traditional boundaries. English, by virtue of its widespread usage across continents, educational systems, and global media, functions as a bridge language, a neutral space in which diverse audiences can meet, listen, and understand one another. When an institution as historically rich and linguistically traditional as the Church adopts this mode of communication, it sends a profound message about unity and accessibility. Language plays a crucial role in shaping human identity and community. It influences how ideas are formed, how traditions are shared, and how empathy is built between people of different backgrounds. In this context, the use of English does not just simplify comprehension, it fosters a shared experience. The impact of hearing a moral and spiritual message in a language that transcends national or ethnic identity is significant. It invites a sense of belonging not just for Catholics, but for all individuals of goodwill who are open to messages of peace, compassion, and mutual understanding. This linguistic inclusivity strengthens the Church's claim to universality, a key concept in its doctrine that emphasizes the Church's mission to serve all of humanity, not just a specific demographic. There is also a pedagogical value in this decision that can be examined through the lens of global citizenship. As students and educators increasingly explore themes of interconnectedness and global responsibility, the strategic use of a shared language in major global addresses sets an example of how communication can be leveraged to reinforce shared human values. It encourages young people to consider language not just as a tool for personal advancement, but as a medium through which collective understanding and ethical discourse can be advanced. When world leaders and spiritual figures model this kind of inclusive communication, they help cultivate a more globally conscious and linguistically agile generation. This choice also reflects a growing recognition of the need for institutions to move beyond their internal norms in order to engage with the broader human family. For centuries, the Church's primary audience was often defined by geography and tradition. However, globalization has changed the way influence operates. Today, audiences are not just national or regional. They are global, online, and multicultural. The intentional shift to a globally understood language acknowledges that in order to guide, teach, and inspire, one must first be understood. It's an affirmation of the principle that relevance in communication is as important as the content being communicated. Without a common language, even the most profound truths can be lost in translation or confined to a narrow audience. This gesture also challenges prevailing narratives about exclusivity and institutional distance. Religious institutions are sometimes criticized for appearing closed off or inaccessible to those outside their immediate traditions. By choosing to speak in a global language, the Church signals a willingness to engage with the world on its terms, not to compromise its beliefs, but to make those beliefs accessible to all. This reflects a broader educational principle that teaching is not merely about delivering information, but about ensuring that information is understood, contextualized, and meaningful to the listener. Effective communication is therefore an act of service, a way of honoring the dignity and intelligence of the audience. Furthermore, in regions where Catholicism is growing, such as sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of the Pacific, English is often one of the official or secondary languages used in education, governance, and media. Addressing these populations in English reinforces their place within the global Church, not as peripheral members but as central participants in the shared mission. It fosters a deeper sense of connection and mutual respect. The message, then, is not just transmitted, it resonates. Ultimately, this approach illustrates the profound role language plays in creating a sense of global moral community. In a fractured world where linguistic, cultural, and ideological differences often serve as dividing lines, the act of speaking in a shared language becomes a form of peacemaking. It is an invitation to unity not through uniformity, but through mutual recognition and understanding. By embracing English as a vehicle for spiritual and ethical communication, the Church not only broadens its audience, it reinforces a timeless message that what unites us is greater than what divides us, and that understanding begins with the willingness to speak in a voice all can hear. The use of humor within a formal religious address, especially one delivered on a global stage, reflects a significant and nuanced shift in how religious leaders communicate with the world. Humor, often perceived as informal or even irreverent in certain sacred contexts, has historically been treated with caution by institutions that emphasize solemnity, tradition, and reverence. However, when used carefully and with intention, humor can serve as an exceptionally powerful rhetorical tool, one that humanizes the speaker, disarms the audience, and opens hearts and minds to deeper truth. In the context of a spiritual or moral message, the presence of a light-hearted remark or a subtle joke carries far more than entertainment value. It communicates humility, relatability, and an understanding of the human condition. Humor has always played an important role in education. Skilled teachers and lecturers often use wit, not only to maintain attention, but to make complex or heavy topics more digestible. In a similar way, a religious figure using humor signals an awareness that even the most serious messages benefit from emotional balance. Listeners are more receptive when they feel relaxed, and laughter creates a shared emotional space that can strengthen the connection between speaker and audience. In this regard, humor serves as an equalizer. It softens hierarchical distinctions and reminds the audience that spiritual leaders, like everyone else, are part of the human experience with its daily struggles, quirks, and imperfections. In global religious discourse, humor also has a strategic pedagogical function. It encourages attentiveness and retention. A well-placed, respectful joke in a major address can make the overall message more memorable, ensuring that audiences continue to reflect on the speech long after it ends. More importantly, it creates an emotional imprint, associating the message not just with solemn instruction, but with warmth and humanity. When leaders display a capacity for humor, they also convey confidence and emotional intelligence, traits that are increasingly valued in contemporary leadership, whether secular or spiritual. From an intercultural perspective, humor can be particularly effective in bridging divides. While humor does not always translate perfectly across languages or cultures, certain forms, such as self-deprecation or gentle irony, are almost universally understood. When a religious leader employs humor in this way, it demonstrates cultural sensitivity and emotional maturity. It shows that the speaker is not taking themselves too seriously and is instead focused on building real, personal connections with the audience. This approach resonates particularly well with younger generations, who often respond more positively to leaders who are authentic, open, and approachable rather than distant or overly formal. In educational settings, particularly those that focus on theology, communication, or leadership studies, this approach offers a valuable lesson. Effective communication is not about maintaining rigid formality at all costs, but about knowing how to meet people where they are. Humor, used wisely, reflects an awareness of timing, audience, and message. It also models emotional resilience and spiritual maturity. After all, to find lightness amid seriousness requires a deep sense of balance. It is not about trivializing sacred topics, but rather about illuminating them with the full spectrum of human emotion. Moreover, humor can be a profound act of service. In a world overwhelmed by anxiety, division, and despair, a moment of joy, even a simple chuckle, can be healing. When a figure of moral authority makes space for humor, they offer a reminder that faith is not only about bearing life's burdens, but also about celebrating its joys. This echoes deeper theological themes as well, that joy is an essential component of spiritual life, and that laughter, like prayer, can be a form of communion. In this context, the inclusion of humor becomes more than a stylistic choice. It becomes a statement. It signals that faith is not confined to solemn rituals or ancient texts, but is something vibrant and alive, capable of engaging with the full range of human emotion. It reminds the audience that spirituality is not about being flawless or perpetually serious, but about being fully present, fully human, and fully engaged with the world. The speech represents a carefully balanced fusion of tradition and innovation, a deliberate act of preserving sacred values while adapting to the modern communicative environment. This duality is at the heart of many enduring institutions, particularly those rooted in centuries of theological, cultural, and philosophical legacy. Within the Church, tradition is not merely a collection of old customs. It is the foundation upon which doctrine, rituals, and communal identity are built. At the same time, for any institution to maintain its relevance and fulfill its mission in a dynamic, fast-paced world, innovation in presentation, language, and engagement methods becomes essential. The address, with its use of English and incorporation of modern rhetorical elements, such as humor and informal tone, exemplifies this balance in real time. One of the most significant educational takeaways from this approach is the understanding that tradition is not inherently opposed to progress. Instead, tradition provides a framework, a philosophical and moral compass, that can guide innovation in a meaningful direction. When a leader respects tradition while updating the method of delivery, the message retains its integrity while becoming more accessible. In this case, the use of modern communication tools and styles does not dilute the theological weight of the message. Rather, it helps ensure that the message reaches more people, more effectively, and with greater clarity. In the classroom, particularly in fields like theology, communication, history, or leadership studies, this theme can be explored as a case study in institutional evolution. Students can analyze how sacred traditions, such as liturgical language or formal dress, carry deep symbolic and doctrinal meanings. Simultaneously, they can examine how those symbols are interpreted, or sometimes misunderstood, in contemporary context. For example, while Latin prayers may preserve historical continuity, they may also alienate those unfamiliar with the language. Shifting toward a globally understood language like English does not erase tradition. It provides a new lens through which tradition can be appreciated and internalized by modern audiences. This blending of old and new also teaches the importance of discernment in leadership. Change for the sake of novelty often leads to confusion or loss of identity, while blind adherence to tradition can render institutions inflexible or out of touch. Effective leadership involves knowing when to hold firm and when to adapt. In this instance, the decision to maintain the core values of the Church while updating its communicative methods is an exercise in precisely that kind of discernment. It demonstrates that true innovation within a traditional framework is not about abandoning foundational beliefs, but about expanding the ways in which those beliefs are shared, practiced, and understood. Furthermore, this keynote can be examined through the lens of digital age pedagogy. With technology reshaping how knowledge is consumed, institutions that wish to educate and inspire must consider new formats, languages, and styles of delivery. Just as educators increasingly use multimedia tools, interactive platforms, and real-world analogies to convey complex ideas, religious leaders must consider how the format of their message affects its reception. The speech, by integrating modern language and tone with timeless themes, mirrors what progressive education aims to do: make the essential truths of the past relevant to the realities of the present. There is also a strong message here about identity. The Church's identity is deeply tied to its tradition, its saints, councils, creeds, and sacred texts. But identity, to remain authentic, must be able to express itself in every age. If the Church had delivered the same message using only traditional forms, it may have upheld its heritage but risked limiting its reach. By innovating in form while remaining faithful in content, the institution reinforces the idea that identity is not static, it is living. And living identities grow, adapt, and communicate in ways that meet people where they are without losing their essential character. In sum, this keynote highlights the intellectual and spiritual wisdom required to bridge time periods, speak to multiple generations, and engage a global audience without compromising the essence of the message. It teaches that reverence for tradition is not about resisting change, but about ensuring that change serves something deeper, something timeless. This model of thoughtful adaptation is an example not just for religious institutions, but for any organization or individual navigating the tension between preserving core values and embracing the tools of a new age. It is a reminder that in education, leadership, and faith alike, the most enduring voices are those that speak both from history and to the future.